everybody, Jeanette here, and welcome to the Neil's Homestead. We've been part of a really messy weather area from, I saw on the news it was from Michigan down into Arkansas, and we haven't had as bad of weather as they have down in southern Missouri, where they've had a lot of tornadoes and they had more flooding, obviously more rain, but we are sogged up about as much as I want to be. We're still expecting to get a little bit of rain here and there over the next several days, but for now all we're getting is sort of a misty patch of weather. It's cloudy and it doesn't make you want to do gardening very much, but I'm out in the greenhouse and I'm just going to show you around, give you a little tour of what's going on, what things look like in the garden area. Thanks for coming. Well, we've planted several things that were in here because we planted all of our cabbage and our broccoli. I bought a flat of cauliflower and got that planted. But we have quite a few peppers. We've got those are tomatillos down here, our ground cherries, and I've got those to plant. And all these marigolds, 250 marigolds. Today I went to the Amish produce auction over by Windsor, and they were having plant sales early in the year. Right now they have a few tomatoes, they have a few cucumbers, salad stuff, green onions, but not very much produce overall. But they do have a lot of plants that are locally grown, produced mostly by the Amish, but not 100%. And I did pretty good. Today I got some really good deals. I bought 5 flats of salvia. 3 of them were solid red, but then 2 of them were the mixed colors, like you can see right over there. This is really what I'm excited about, is these gazanias. I bought 5 flats of them too. These are flowers that we saw a lot of out in California when we took our trip there about 3 weeks ago or so. They're a perennial in a certain area, but they can't be a perennial in our area because they can't take the cold that we have. But they're beautiful. I didn't really get exposed to gazanias in my whole life until about last year. One thing I like about them is that they like the heat, they like the sun, and they kind of like to be on the dry side. And so the salvia also likes the heat and the sun, and the marigolds like the heat and the sun. So I've got this place that I'm going to fill up with those 3 kinds of flowers, and I hope that it'll be really pretty. Our crate that we filled up with onion sets has done real well. It's not, I don't think they're growing as fast as they would outside, but I think they've done real well. And if somebody has a limited amount of space, then I think it was a good way to make some onions for yourself. My 2 long pots of cilantro came up really nicely. In case you didn't watch before, the seed I used was like 4 years old, and I wasn't sure whether it was going to come up, but it did come up really well. Here's my bowl of lettuce that I put 8 little seedlings in a while back, and I've picked off this bowl of lettuce like 8 or 10 times already. It's done really good. Here's something that's not really garden oriented, but it's part of our yard, and I don't know if you've, on any of our videos, we have these old Adirondacks type chairs that were sitting out there that were just old weathered raw wood. Well, old guy brought them in here and he got them all painted up, and they look really pretty. My peas that I planted out here around this trellis are coming up in spite of the rain. Down there along the ground, there's kind of a ditch that we created from tilling, and that thing was full of water more than one time. I wasn't sure whether the peas would be able to come up in that kind of condition or not, but they are starting to. In the middle of the hoop, you can see that there are weeds growing in there, but I'm going to do an experiment this year where I plant lettuce in there. I think that the lettuce will grow well in the hot summer in that hoop, because the peas or whatever else we might plant in there are going to grow up over the top and offer it some shade. I think lettuce has 2 enemies to go bad, to go to seed or to turn bitter, and that is the heat and lack of water. So if I can decrease the amount of heat in there by offering some shade, and you know, we can always give it more water if we want to. It's not always fun, but we can do it. So I'm hoping to have a little bit better a chance of having lettuce over the more of the summer instead of just the springtime. So the hoop is right here. That greenhouse right there is number 1, where we grow our plants. The hoop is here, and then we have this little patch of ground that was a garden for us a long time ago. Then we grew blackberries in there. We ripped them all out, and then we've been using this as garden again. There's nothing planted in there right now. It's just tilled up, waiting. This is a string trellis, homemade string trellis that's just waiting for some long beans that will climb on that, and for green beans. Here's a nice patch of elephant garlic. This is going into the garden house, where there is more elephant garlic all along the south side and the east side. In the middle, we've got lettuce. On this side, aside from a little bit of lettuce, we have kale, Swiss chard, and there's a couple of, actually 5 broccoli plants back there. With all this rain, we have had a problem here with this side, because there's actually a big tear in the roof up there, and anytime it rains, it's just dripping right down in there, and it's making the plants a mess, and I expect everything's probably a little wetter than it ought to be. I've really enjoyed having salads already this year. I try not to buy from the grocery store too much, but I was a few times buying some salad and things to make salads out of before I was able to have some of our own lettuce. But now I'm grateful that we have this. Pretty much all we can eat right now. This patch right here is an asparagus bed. But looking at all that green in there, I'm going to tell you what that is. It's either butternut or spaghetti squash. We had a lot of butternut and spaghetti squash left over from the winter. We put it in the compost pile and it broke down, but it didn't kill the seeds. And so when we brought compost over to put it on top of the asparagus this spring, we planted a whole bunch of these winter squash. Now, I think I'm actually going to leave some of that in there, but not as thick as it is now. I think if it can grow in there and kind of cover the ground, it'll keep it cooler, and I think it could help. It wouldn't work against it, but if I have too much in there, nothing else is going to do any good. So I'll clean some of those little plants out of there. We got a few strawberry plants that are blooming, but not very many. And then, as I said a while ago, this used to be a blackberry patch, a thornless blackberries, and we still have some growing in there. So I think we might let them grow this year and see how it goes. We don't want a big mess, but they tend to be a mess. In greenhouse number 2, where we planted all these onions, they're doing pretty good. We've weeded them a couple of times and run water and fertilizer through the drip line. There are some sections that are kind of weird, like right down there. Those did not do anything. We planted them in there and they didn't do very well at all, but like right next door, those are doing really nice. Don't know the problem with that. I don't know the difference, what happened there. Greenhouse number 3 is pretty much the same as greenhouse number 2, only like 10 feet wider, so there's a lot more onion plants in there. We do need to go back in and over on this side especially clean up some weeds. We have some big dock plants in there that I'll either cut down or pull up. They're really hard to pull up. Here we are in greenhouse number 4. And there we find old guy back there. Hey, he's planting cucumbers. Right up here from one end to the other we've got a string running, and then we've got boards that are attached to the string that go down to the ground as support for the cucumbers to climb on. We tie strings to the string across there and let them hang down, and the cucumbers vine all over that. The tomatoes that we planted in here are doing amazingly well. I'm very happy with them. It's time to get them tied up because look at the size of that. That was not very long ago that those got put in there. They're growing amazing. And over here on the west side of greenhouse number 4 is a bunch of spinach. And this is another thing that I've really looked forward to, is having this spinach, and we've already picked a lot of it. I think I'm going to have enough to put in the freezer. Starting about here, I've got beets growing and weeds. There's a whole bunch of weeds and grass growing in there, and that's pretty high on the to-do list. I actually have 2 double rows growing in here. This one right here, which is right over a drip line that's under the soil, and they came up and are growing at a surprisingly good rate. But over here, closer to the edge, is the same kind of row, planted the same day. The soil was wet over there just because of the outside. The curtain right here goes down, and it was pretty wet in there, but they didn't come up as well. This is a nice patch of radishes. We've been eating a lot of radishes, and we're going to have to eat more. I don't really know much about how to put radishes away. I know some people would pickle them. That's a small patch of pak choy, which is kind of a Chinese cabbage. And down through here I've got another double row here and maybe a single row over there. Same story with these 2 rows and being planted at the same time but coming up so very differently. I will say that I have a theory on why that one row came up better, and because they were both pretty evenly wet, I think. But the water coming out of the row that came up a lot better would have been ground temperature, where that one on the outside of the edge of the greenhouse, the ground might have been cooler there, but the water warmed the soil up a little bit more and let the seeds germinate faster. I don't know if I'm right, but that's my theory. I just have to show you our nice patch of lamb's quarter weeds. We'll have to get those out of there. They're edible, but when you have a lot of this kind of stuff to eat, well, you'd kind of rather eat spinach or even kale or something like that. If I was hungry, I would not mind at all eating lamb's quarter every day because it is very good. And I have been picking some and putting it in my salad now and then, but I'm to a point where I've got a lot of lettuce, a lot of spinach, and so probably don't want the lamb's quarter as much. Here's where the cucumbers are going in from the opposite end of the building. And then over right along the east edge of this is where he planted my zucchini plants, because I had some zucchini plants that really needed to get planted or else I might have to throw them away, and it's too wet outside, so he went ahead and planted them in here. I've been told, and I believe, that zucchini plants do not do the greatest in a high tunnel situation. And I think it's because there's not enough air flowing around, and they have to be pollinated by the air. But this is going to be right by the curtain, and when it's hot and we drop the curtain, I think enough air can come in here. And we might have to kind of shake the plants a little bit now and then to create a pollinating effect. But we're going to try anyway. I mean, I can start more zucchini, and I probably should. I like to have new zucchini every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, making several plantings of it over the season. So you can always have fresh zucchini. You don't have any stalled times or anything like that. Now that's more important when you're trying to sell zucchini than it is whenever you're just trying to raise your own food. When you're trying to sell zucchini, you want the best looking, freshest zucchini that you can get at all times. You don't, after a while when it's growing, it gets kind of ugly, and it's okay for you to eat, but not necessarily okay for you to sell, because customers like good looking produce.
Well, we're soon going to be at the halfway mark on planting our cucumbers. These are our pickler cucumbers. this first tray, and so we'll soon be through with them.
When I left number 4, I had to walk by here, so I thought, well, I'll just show you our massive bunch of apple mint. We've tried to kill this stuff before. It's growing all along the end of Jeremiah's house. This year, I'm going to come up here. I'm determined to come up here and pick this and dry it in my dehydrator so that I can have this over the winter. It makes a really good tea. Apple mint is a variety of spearmint. It has these really pretty fuzzy leaves, which is kind of funny to have fuzzy mint. It's wet right now because it's drizzly out here, but it's really a pretty mint, but it's so prolific that it's crazy. We also have this little patch of chocolate mint, and chocolate mint is a peppermint. And it is not nearly as invasive and prolific, although it is growing out into the yard where we'll be mowing it up, but it doesn't get out of control as much as that apple mint. So let's go out to the open field area and I'll show you what's going on out there. Out in the south patch is at first where we planted our potatoes quite a while back. There's some water standing out there, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't go all the way down through the patch. And I can see where the potatoes are coming up. Next we have the broccoli, the cauliflower, and the cabbage plants. After that, there are several rows of onions, you know, the black plastic rows, and they're doing very well. I think they're keeping up with, and maybe even doing better than the ones we have in the high tunnels. Now this is the green bean row where we did our Indian bean dance when we planted, and I'm kind of surprised, but they're coming up, just barely. Hopefully we'll get a good stand. It's cold rain is kind of hard on things like that, but we can see them popping up through there. As we make our way down past the onions and beyond south of there, down here we have another row of pak choi that was started by plants and then set out in the field here. From there on over to the east is another section of ground that we plant in, and in here there's nothing coming up yet, but I just wanted to show you we grew even more beets. I'm hoping to have a massive beet crop this year. Well, that gives a little walk around of the place and what the gardens look like. In spite of the mud, I feel like things are pretty good. The only thing that I really feel like I need to get on out into the ground very soon, but I'm not too late, is the peppers, the tomatillos, and the ground cherries. And then get the flowers planted, and I think I'm pretty good. So, hope you're not drowning out wherever you are. I hope you're having a great spring, and I hope I'll see you again. Thanks for coming. Bye.